Hey, welcome to the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. Today's conversation is with Kendra Cooke. And before we get started into it, I do want to issue a little bit of an apology. We had technical difficulties with some of our audio. It happens from time to time. And we considered not releasing this episode because of some of the issues with the audio. But the information in it is so good that we're going to ask you to be patient and listen through the audio issues and listen for the content. Kendra brings a lot of really good information. She is a senior real estate coach with the core training, a fantastic individual, and some really practical advice about time management. So forgive the audio issues, listen through it, and listen for the good advice and the good content from Kendra Cooke. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready for the conversation.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
Well, welcome, Kendra. Thank you for being here today. You are with us remotely from up the interstate a little ways, but I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here.
Thank you so much for hosting today. I'm excited.
All right. So one of the things we do here is rapid fire, 5 randomly selected questions just to get under your skin with unknown point values. So if you like to win, it's a hard game to win because you have no idea what you're winning, but we'll jump into it. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, if you could live anywhere in the world for 1 year, where would it be?
Greece.
Greece. I like that. Why?
Most beautiful water I've ever seen in my life.
Very cool. How many times have you been there?
Only once. I spent 10 days there, and the people were amazing. The food was great, but the water was absolutely stunning.
Yeah, that is one of the places on the list that I would love to visit at one point in time. We were very, very close to visiting a couple of years ago, and ended up going elsewhere. But that is something that I definitely would like to see. So I agree with you there. Number 2, what is something that you're great at cooking?
My husband would tell you I'm really good at, he would say, what would he say? There's a couple things. He loves my potato salad, if that's really cooking. But if I'm really cooking something, probably lasagna.
Oh, okay. Well, I could enjoy that. That's cool. I like to ask people these types of questions so I know where I need to go when I get hungry. Number 3, what is something that you absolutely hate doing? If you could just eliminate it from your schedule, what would it be?
Firing someone. It's not fun, but we do have to do it as a leader, right? It's not something but I do not like it. That's
a great, that could be a whole nother podcast. All right, I'm going to pause on that one, but that's a great answer. I think everybody would. Well, those of us with a heart would want to get that out. Number 4, have you ever won a contest?
I have, yeah.
What'd you win?
Some tickets to a concert.
Ooh. What concert
on a radio station. This was olden days, where we actually stood and dialed on the phone, the old days before the cell phone.
Yeah, you had to have it preloaded and ready to go so you could.
Yeah, well, actually, it was punch button on the wall.
Oh, well, hold on a second now.
Now I'm telling my age. We had the long cord, and that was the party line, one phone, and you're all fighting to get one phone. Who's going to talk to their friends first and the longest?
What concert was it?
I went to see Bon Jovi.
Oh, well, those were good tickets to win.
My high school. Yeah, it was when I was in high school.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, last question. Number 5. What work is giving you energy right now?
I love working with people's budget and their personal budget and their P&L. So right now, just seeing how people are really conscious about their money and how they're saving money and giving money away, it gives me a ton of great energy to see that we're making an impact in our business.
It's interesting. It's one of the things I've picked up, and we'll get into kind of the group that you're a part of. But that's one of the things that I've picked up very and noticed that is of interest to me is the fact that how involved you are in P&Ls and budgets and helping people not only with their business finances but their personal finances to be successful. And it has been one of those categories from a business owner that I've always been a little hesitant to get involved with is personal finances with anybody that's involved in the organization. And I've started to take a different approach to it because I can see if people are making good financial decisions personally, that they're probably going to do a lot better job making good financial decisions in the business as well. So I can see that as a good stair step. Very cool. All right, you passed 5 questions. We'll give you a score of 814.
Nice. Perfect. Love it.
All right. Well, let's jump into the conversation. Let's get a little bit of a background as to who you are, and kind of what it is that you do. So you're a coach with core training. So what does that mean? If I'm listening or watching this for the first time, what does that mean?
Well, we are an elite coaching company for real estate agents and loan officers around the country. And so what we do is we coach our clients on 3 main parts of their business, which would be lead generation, building a team to cater to the client, and then counting the money. And so what qualifies me to be a coach with our company is all of our coaches are homegrown, is what we like to say, meaning that we all went through the program as a realtor or lender and are still in the program. So I am a licensed realtor in the state of Tennessee and still hold my license there, even though I work in Charlotte as the senior real estate coach here, but have spent the last 30 years of my life in the real estate business in some capacity. So from the time I was 18, I started on as a weekend receptionist and then moved into an office administration person and then on to running a team and then getting licensed and owning my own brokerage, becoming a coach, and then or was a coaching student, I guess would be first with the core, and then came on as a coach, kept my real estate business alive, coached for them independently, and then in 2017 moved to Charlotte, and so now I run our real estate division as the senior real estate coach. All
right, so one of the things that in the main topic of conversation today is time management, and we'll get into that in just a few moments, but with everything that you just described, the entire path there to get to that point, I would imagine you have had so many different experiences, and I think is one of the really cool things. And I've heard you speak a couple of times. I've heard you share some stories a few times about that journey, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I think a lot of what you talk about and the messaging that you talk about is very real. It's very practical. You very transparent. And honest about some of the processes, some of the journey that you've gone through. And I think that is something that speaks to a lot of people because, as a business owner, as a leader, whatever, you're sitting there going, man, am I the only one that's struggling with this? And, I remember sitting there listening and going, oh, wow, I can definitely understand every single thing that you just said. So I appreciate you sharing that and the fact that you kind of into this point. And I've been around you to a little bit to know that it gives you energy to see other people succeed. And I think that's one of the major attributes of being a coach. I think that's really, really cool.
Yes, thank you. I always say I'll know I'm a good coach when all my students have surpassed me, have broken all my records and made more than me and closed more than me and sold more than me and saved more than me. Then I know I will have done a good job.
Very, very cool. Okay, so let's get into time management because I struggle with this, right? This is something that I've always struggled with is work runs my life, work overruns a lot of what I do. And I know you shared a story one time, and I'll let you kind of get into that, but you shared a story about some of the struggles that you've had at various points of your career. So what does time management meant to you through the process of all of the different things that you just described, your journey through real estate?
Well, I'll go as far back as how I found the core. Okay. And the thing about real estate agents are we're independent contractors, so there's no one telling us what time to come to work and what time to go home. And nobody really saying, here are your 10 tasks for the day. When you get that done, you can go home. So I am a self-proclaimed workaholic. And so when I got in real estate, shortly after I got my license, my husband lost his job. And it was kind of sink or swim at that point. I became a real estate agent from a secretary in the real estate industry because I wanted to work when I wanted to work. I wanted to have freedom. And anybody who knows who's a salesperson, we don't have any freedom. We actually work when everybody else wants us to work. But long story short, it was kind of sink or swim for us as a family while my husband was trying to find another job. And I really just wanted to be all things to all people. And so what happened was I let my guard down. I stopped having boundaries for myself. And so when somebody called and said, hey, can you list my house at 7:30 at night because my kids will be in bed? I'm like, sure. And they're like, can you present an offer at 6 o'clock in the morning? Because that's when I get out of the gym. Sure. And so what I found out was I was just working 24/7. So the first attempt to save my marriage was my husband asked me to take my computer and my fax machine. This will tell you how long ago this was. This was in 2004, out of our home. Because what would happen is I would go in just to send one more fax or to check my email one more time. And I would come out at 11 o'clock and everybody would be in bed. Mm-hmm. And so the first attempt was get the computer out of the house. So we did that. And then the thing that happened that really said, okay, you either get yourself in check or you're not going to save your marriage was I would find myself not getting everything done when I needed to at the office. Mm-hmm. So I would come home and park my car outside my garage, and I would come through our utility room and I would turn the chimer, the dinger, whatever you want to call it, on your security system off. And I would come in the house and I would have dinner with my family and I would bathe our child. We would put him to bed. And then when my husband and I would go to bed, as soon as I knew he was asleep, I would sneak out of my house at home. Mm-hmm. And nobody would know because the chime didn't go off when I opened the door and I didn't open the garage door. And so I got in my car, I'd go to my office and I would work until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, hey, I'm no harm, no foul. My family's sleeping. I'm not taking anything away from them. And so in my mind, I made that okay. Mm-hmm. And so this went on for months. And then finally, we had a police officer who would come by every night and check on me. He would come by. My office was in the back of the building. He would shine his light in the blind. I would open the blind and wave, and he would drive on by. I had sold him his house. He lived in our neighborhood. And so this went on for months. And so he said to my husband, wow, your wife works a lot of hours. And he goes, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, she's at that office all hours of the day and night. Her car is always there. And so, needless to say, I came home one day to turn off the chimer on the alarm, and my husband said, don't turn it off. Come on in. We're going to have the come to Jesus meeting for the second time. And lo and behold, he said, I know where you've been. I know what you're doing. And I appreciate the fact that you're trying to take care of our family, but one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have an accident, fall asleep behind the wheel, because you're not sleeping at night, or someone's going to abduct you coming out of an office building at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And either way, I'm alone. You're leaving a child. This is not what I signed up for. You need to fix it. Yeah. And so that's really how it was the awakening of you got to own your time because nobody else will. Yeah. And so I went to my first event for the summit for the Corps. And the first class I went to, the guy was like, we're going to work on time management. I'm like, what exactly is time management? Because, I can't manage anything right now, much less my time. Mm-hmm. But long story short, he gave me some really good pointers from the front of the room that said, listen, figure out what you're worth per hour and do the work that makes you that much per hour, not the other stuff. So hiring people. So I got in the mindset that I don't have to be all things to all people. Mm-hmm. And so that started my journey of hiring people. And then having a start time and a go home time. How brilliant. Like half of America has a start time and a go home time. The independent contractors or the entrepreneurs, we don't have anything like that. So I had to set some boundaries for myself, but that kind of set me on the journey. And so since then, I really tell people you can't really manage your schedule 100% of the time. You can't own it because we all have outside forces. We have kids that get sick or we have employees that don't show up. But if you master your schedule 80% of the time, you're a master, right? Because the other 20% is going to be an outside force that may bring something to you that's unexpected. But if you can really own it 80% of the time, I would consider you a taskmaster or time manager, really mastering that task, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that's probably something valid to hang on to that may not be necessarily underlined. So somebody's listening to this and like, yeah, I got that. Yeah, yes, I've stayed at the office too late. Yes, I've gone in at crazy hours. Oh, okay, I've done all that. I guess the thing about mastering it 80% of the time, and at least understanding there, if I do have an issue that comes up, I do have a little bit of leniency to fix that, and it's not like, oh gosh, everything is falling apart and I totally screwed this up. You have some ability to understand that. So having it done 80% of the time, I think is very reasonable. So setting boundaries, learning to delegate, and the thing that you said at the very beginning is a lot of people go into either the real estate world or in business ownership or entrepreneurship with kind of that elusive goal of having some flexibility and freedom. Like, man, I want to do this so that I have the ability to have the freedom, and it inevitably is the opposite, right? You're locked down more than you were before. So to get back that freedom, the process, what is the process to start to gain back some of that freedom, so to set some of those boundaries that you can say, these are things that are important. And I think you said something very interesting about, delegating. What is my time really worth, and what are the things that are important for me? I've heard other people say, what are the things that only you can do, and then get folks to help you with the other parts. But as far as, practical steps, so I'm way out of schedule, don't have a start and stop time, everything's just kind of crazy. What are some of the practical things that I could start doing, in my role that would help me to start getting towards that 80% of control?
I love it. So what I would do is I tell people, for a solid week, write everything down on a yellow pad or a notebook that you do. As a realtor, call for feedback, set appointments, put listing packets together, pull comps. So make a list of everything you do, okay? And then either circle, highlight the ones that you can delegate that somebody else can do, okay? And so what's left on there, if you are a small business owner, a salesperson, you know that prospecting has to happen every single day. We have to pack that pipeline to keep the residual income flowing so we can pay everybody and pay the bills and take our money home and all that. So the first task is figure out what you can delegate. So a week of everything on a sheet. Now you have pretty much written your job description for your first hire, because that's what you can delegate off, yep. Right? And so what's left, then we're going to take that and we're going to time block that on a schedule. And I think, I say that text messaging is the spawn of the devil, because, you can never get away from it. People think you should answer it 24/7, but really, when we went to cell phones in general, it really screwed up everything, because we're like, oh, we can do everything on our phone. We don't want to kill the trees anymore. We don't want to print a schedule. And I disagree with that. I mean, you can see me on calendar, but on camera, this is my schedule for the day. It's time blocked. I print it every single day. Yep. And so for me, once I figured out what my jobs are that I have to do no matter what, then I time block it. And so I'm a taskmaster. So every time my time block is completed, I check it off. And so at the end of the day, when I look at my schedule and everything got done, I can walk out of here and flip the light off and say, hey, I did my best. My best was good enough. And so I think a couple things as a start time, a go home time, figuring out what you can delegate to someone who makes less money than you, so you can do the high value dollar activities. So figure out what your jobs are, time block them, print your schedule every single day. It's not an option. Print that schedule. And then the last thing I would tell you is really to master your schedule is you have to have some personal time, some family time, some self time in there. I think that's really where most people, I won't say lose their mind, but get upside down or get out of whack, is we're being all things to everyone except ourselves, or we're being all things to everyone except our family. And at the end of the day, when everything's going haywire and we need somebody to talk to, it's going to be our family, our partners, our spouses, the people that are home, our kids that are going to support us and be that saving grace. So we have to make sure that when you're using your time block schedule, there's some things on there to take care of your body, who's the temple, right? If I'm burned out, unhealthy, unhappy, I'm not going to really be good for anybody else. So those are a couple tips I would tell you to really start to manage your schedule and your time to where you can learn to master it. And I tell people, if you get, start 50%, because once you block it, yeah, things are still going to get in the way. You may still be understaffed. People don't understand the system that you're transferring to. So start with 50%. Hey, if I can knock 50% of my time blocks off in a day, whoo, I'm in good shape. And get that down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then go to 60% and work your way up, because you're not going to just master it the first day out. You're just not.
So how important would you put communicating that to your team? So if you are working with other folks, like, is it you've been super flexible for forever, and then you walk in on Monday and you're like, all right, today's the day I'm going to a schedule, and everybody needs to respect my schedule. Like, how do you get other folks involved with that process so they are aware of what's kind of changing?
They should have one too. That's the key. Everybody should have a time block schedule. So what we do is, we have a team meeting every single morning. Every morning, same time, same place, 9 o'clock, we have a team meeting. And that's basically your who's on first meeting, if you will.
Yep.
What leads came in, who has a problem file they need help with, what marketing ideas have to get out today. And we all bring our schedules, so we know who's where and who's doing what. And so, you know, I always say, hey, I've got some flex time from 10 to 10:30. If anybody has a question or needs help with a file, come see me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, between 4 and 4:30, that's my wrap up. Now, the key to that is having some space for some flex time in there, because things are going to happen. But usually what happens is we book ourselves, and I was so guilty of this, back to back to back appointments, and forgetting that I had to drive from one side of town to the other to get from one house to the other. I guess I thought my helicopter was just going to get me there. So I was always late. And so what happened was I would call my team and say, hey, can you call and tell Chad I'm 15 minutes late? Mm-hmm. And then I would be 15 minutes late leaving that meeting. And the next one was, hey, I'm going to be 20 minutes late to meet Aaron. Can you call Aaron? And so I was making them out to be the bad cop. And finally, they all said to me, stop it. Like, get out of your calendar. Let us manage it. We'll put the drive times in there. And we don't have to be the bad person calling saying you're always late. And wow, what a relief. You know, I wasn't stressed. I mean, when you're running late, you're cutting in and out of traffic, you're barking at people, biting people's heads off. And so if everybody owns a schedule, you're respectful of each other. So the team meeting will help with distractions through the day. But honestly, you know, my assistant runs my team on her own time block schedule. Now she has mine because she comes to my door 5 minutes before my next appointment, says, are you ready? You got everything, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if somebody else can help you manage your schedule and be the gatekeeper, that will also help you hit that more than 50, 60% of the time.
Yeah, I think that's very, I mean, that's a hard thing to kind of wrap my head around, because I feel like a lot of times in a calendar, you know, I'll be looking at my calendar and maybe I have a lot of gaps in between meetings or whatever. And then somebody will contact me and say, hey, do you have time to chat about whatever? And you know, my gut instinct is to say, yeah, I can squeeze them in here, right? And because I don't want to let that individual down, because I want to create time for them, mm-hmm. and then ultimately, it offsets everything else. Yeah, it pushes everything else off. And I guess at the end of the day, that's probably, maybe I'm the only person that does that. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's essentially pushing less priority to the other people that were already on the calendar. So somebody's just jumped in, and you know, I feel like I'm trying to do them a favor by giving them that time, but at the end of the day, I'm actually doing something worse for the rest of the people on my calendar.
Yeah, so let me give you two little quick tidbits on that.
All right.
Okay. If you have somebody that can manage your schedule, they now become the bad cop, and Chad is always the good cop. And so what happens is, somebody calls and says, hey, can I get on your schedule to pick your brain? You know what? I don't manage my calendar, but give me just a second. I'm going to connect you to Diana and she'll get it scheduled. Now she's the bad cop that says, gosh, she can't do it today, mm-hmm. but she has this time tomorrow and she has this time on Friday. Which one works better, right? She's trained to maneuver that around. Now, if I have some space and she knows it's not going to get me late home for date night or make me miss another appointment, she can make that happen. But she's always the bad cop and I'm always the good cop. Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing I would tell you. If you get to the point somebody else can help you manage your schedule, you never have to say no. It's great. Okay, you never have to say no.
Yep.
You never have to say no.
Yeah.
Got it? All right. And the second thing is treat yourself like a doctor. Okay. When you pick up the phone and you call the doctor's office, does the doctor answer the phone?
No, they don't.
No. Okay. And so, and when I say, hey, I just want to pop by and pick your brain today, do I get to pop in and pick the doctor's brain today?
I guess it depends on the type of doctor that you have, but most likely.
Right? And so I think we have to start setting our expectations as, hey, we're a professional. It doesn't matter what profession you're in, right? I mean, it's okay to have a gatekeeper. It's okay to have somebody schedule your appointments, because I went through that for a while too in my mind, that, oh no, they only want to talk to me. They only want to work with me. Well, who cares who sets the appointment up, or who cares who's managing the calendar, as long as I get them on there.
Yeah.
And so my mind always went to the doctor-nurse mentality. The nurse can set the appointment. The nurse can send me the forms. The nurse can take my blood pressure. But when it's time to assess the big high dollar value activity, if you will, or the illness or whatever, then the doctor steps in. So I think that mindset will help manage some of that too, when you have a team you can delegate things to.
I can't remember what book it was, but there was a book that I was going through at one point, and they were talking about kind of in the early days they couldn't afford to have an executive assistant or anybody to help to manage their schedule. So they're like, it was a lot more cost effective to pay for a second email address. And so, they just kind of came up with their own virtual assistant that was like, Debbie at whatever the website was. And it was like, well, let me have Debbie schedule this. And so Debbie was always the person saying yes or no that could schedule at your availability. But it was really the same person. They were just using that name to try to offload that. So that's a valid point is when you feel like you have to create space for people, figuring out some way to either have complete, just gut-wrenching honesty with everybody, or to figure out a way that somebody can help you to manage your schedule so that it can open up that space for you. So, and then on top of that, when you're printing your schedule, that is essentially, if you're printing it or however, and I know you guys are hardcore on the printing, it at the end of the day, it is showing intentionality that this matters, right? Like, you can have the greatest schedule in the world, you can have all the time blocks in the world, but if you just leave it sitting on the desk and cover stuff over it, then it still does no good.
Right. Or if it's in your phone and you just swipe right or swipe left, ignore, it's really easy for me. I mean, it's something will pop up on my phone. I'm just like, ignore. My phone's on silent now. It's probably rang several times since I've been sitting here, but I wouldn't know it. So if my phone's telling me to go to my next appointment, I've got it on silent, I'm in trouble. So the calendar being with me all day long really keeps me on task.
All right. So I like the kind of what you said about writing every task down. I think that's again, very fundamental action. I remember a couple of years ago, I went through some kind of key results area, some strategic planning type stuff, kind of jotting those things down. And that was a very similar exercise. Get it down on paper, see what are the things that only you can do, everything else. How can I create a space for somebody else to own that responsibility? If it isn't something that Chad has to touch, and if it isn't something that Kendra has to touch, then I'm holding that back from somebody else. And at the end of the day, right, it comes down to somebody else could probably do it better. If it's something that I don't have to do, I'm probably doing a poor job at it at the end of the day. So giving them the ability to do that as well. Okay. Any other tips that you would have on time management? Because I want to jump to maybe a totally different subject about barriers to getting those big clients that you want, or barriers to finding the clients that you want. So, but before we get to that, are there any other thoughts on time management that we just totally missed over because I wasn't paying attention?
No, I don't think so. I think we gave them some good tactics that they could implement. But the main thing is when you're hiring, hire for those positions and things that you need them to do, and that will also help them with that. And then teaching your team to really respect time as well. I mean, there's two things God's not making more of. One is time and one is land. And so I do my best not to abuse either one.
Very, very good point. Okay. So you've been in the real estate game for a while. You've mentioned that earlier. You've been through a lot of different aspects of that through your journey. And over time, you've landed some pretty big clients. What would you say is a barrier? Some of the things that people, because everybody wants to get the big client. Everybody wants to land that big deal. But it seems like there's some barriers that people are just either not willing to do, or they just don't know what they should be doing in order to get that. What have you seen that are barriers to people actually getting the clients that they want? Okay,
so I'll give you a couple, 2 or 3 ideas here. So number one, people are fearful of rejection. And, I love to say that there's 2 things you cannot get on the phone. One is a black eye. Nobody can black your eye for calling. So if they don't want to talk to you, they're just going to hang up. It's okay. Mm-hmm. And the second thing about the phone is if you've not been cussed out in business, you've not lived, right? So none of us have died from somebody getting mad at us, and nobody can black our eyes. So tip number 1 is pick up the phone and make the big calls. Mm-hmm. I'm always shocked when I coach people and I'm like, you're in a town with MD Anderson Hospital. Why wouldn't you call the HR director? Or why wouldn't you call the physician's recruiter and see if you can help some of those doctors that are relocating in or out or whatever? And they're like, oh, no. how hungry are you? How bad do you want it? Right. So number one, take the risk, make the big calls. And number two, don't be a secret anything. You have to put yourself out in the circles where you are seen and you are respected and you are thought of as a professional in your industry. Quick story, one of the big clients that you're referring to was a huge builder who came to Nashville. They were in Nashville area and they left and were gone for many years and came back to Nashville. And the sales manager or the sales director coming out of Atlanta called me on a Friday. Well, I didn't work on Friday afternoons because I picked up my son on Friday afternoon. We had a date every Friday. I left my office at 2:00, part of my time management. He called and said, hey, I'd like to buy a cup of coffee in the morning. I'm like, I don't work on Saturdays. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I picked up this phone because I really thought it was somebody else calling about an offer. So we chit-chatted for a few minutes. He said, I really want to pick your brain. And instantly I went to a bad place in my head that here's this big builder that's going to come in from a different state and they're going to pick my brain and then they're going to come build houses here and they're not going to pay me and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And they just want something for free. And I went there in my mind. But then on this other, you know, quickly my mind shifted. I'm like, what can you lose, right? What is there to lose? Learn about the product. Maybe you got a buyer. You can take a couple buyers over and get paid really quickly. So I agreed to do it, but I told him I'm a runner. And so I run on Saturday morning. So I'm going to have, you know, baseball cap on. I'm going to be sweaty. I'll come right after my run. He said, okay. So we met at Panera and I told him he'd get 30 minutes. We sat there for 2.5 hours. He was a wonderful human. He is still a wonderful human, a very dear friend of mine. But really what happened was I'm like, why me? Like, how'd you find me? Yeah. And this is why I tell you to put yourself out there, because he said he had gone to the planning commission in the town where I lived and had talked about buying some lots and building. And the planning commissioner said, you have to talk to Kendra Cooke. She's the real estate. She's the new construction real estate guru. And he said, and then I pulled in a neighborhood and there was a builder and I could, you know, he had the magnet on his truck. He was the builder and he stopped and he said, hey, I'm with this builder and I'm thinking I might come here and buy some lots. And he says, you should talk to Kendra Cooke. She's the expert. She lists all my stuff. And it happened 3 times in a matter of a week that he was doing exploratory work in my town. And he said, I had to meet you. You have, you know, this persona preceding you. And he said, you know, I really want to meet you. And so that taught me that, you know, going to the planning commission meetings and being respectful of people, of my time, learning about different industries, giving to the community, sitting on boards for nonprofits, it just opened a lot of doors for me. And I think people are like, oh, I don't want to spend my time there, but it paid off in a big way for me. So relationships are key. We had an amazing ride together. I ended up that day before I left. Here's the third tip. You always have to be closing. If you're a salesperson, you always have to close for the business. And so when we were leaving, I said, well, how do I earn your business? If you're going to come here, you know, and I knew they had a national real estate company, so I wasn't expecting to get anything out of it. And he said this to me, if you hadn't asked, you wouldn't have got anything, but we're going to work together.
Oh, wow.
And I closed 182 sales with them in 1 year.
Wow.
So 3 things, make the big call. Put yourself out there in circles where people are watching you and be careful because they are watching you. And then number 3, ask for the business. And I think that's been the key to my success of landing big deals.
That's exciting. If you didn't ask, you wouldn't have got anything. It just gave you my time. But if all you had to do was walk away and you would have got nothing, but all you had to do was ask. And the worst thing that can happen is no, right? So right. Very, very cool. I think the pro level would have been, I run every Saturday morning, and so if you want to meet with me, then I hope you have your running shoes. That would have been cool.
That's what I would have said with Aaron.
That would be a fun meeting. Well, very cool, Kendra. I think you've left us with a lot of information to chew on. Time management, making a schedule, sticking to it, giving yourself some gaps and some time blocks to get in there, finding the things that only you can do, delegating the things that you don't have to do, so that gives you more time back in your day, and have a start and stop time. Those are some really big things that I think we can all learn from and start to move in that direction, because if not, it's going to take over your life. And, the interesting thing, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but as you tell your story of you coming home and disabling the chime on the door and sneaking back out at night, it doesn't sound like you're going after work. It sounds like you're doing something different. And it's like, well, I mean, that's not so bad. She's just going to work. But at the end of the day, it is. I mean, it's a drain. And so kudos to your husband for standing up to you. Hopefully my wife doesn't listen to this and start to do the same thing to me. So very, very cool. Thank you very much for your time again and for your insights today. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Can you copy this key? That's a question we get asked about 3,422 times a year. And how can you actually be sure that the person who asked that question is supposed to get a copy of that key? Well, we think you should always know who can copy your keys to your business and your home, because it could be your neighbor, an old employee, a contractor, or even worse, your mother-in-law. At Loc-Doc Security, we believe in protected key systems, so you always know who has a copy of your key. To find out more, visit locdoc.net or stop by our Charlotte location. Loc-Doc Security, helping you protect your people and your property. Kendra, thank you very much again for joining us today. Always a blast to chat with her. Have had an opportunity to chat with her on multiple occasions, and it's always seeming she's always had a great attitude, great positive person to be around, so always great to listen to folks like that. Thank you very much for watching today. Thank you for listening today. If this is your first time, we ask you to subscribe. We have 100+ other episodes already out there for you. Many of those are going to be just in alignment with these types of topics. We are honestly trying to share information for business ideas, practices, and strategies that will be relevant to you. And so we invite you to go subscribe and check out all of the other episodes that we have for you on various topics just like this that you can apply to your business or to your leadership team. We have a brand new episode every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., so be sure to subscribe so you get alerts on that. And we'll see you next time right here on the Coffee Break Podcast.